All right, everybody, we're getting right to it tonight. We've already talked Darrell Brooks today. We watched the closing arguments together. We saw all the shenanigans that happened earlier today in the courtroom. And just more stuff is happening. Like, this is the trial that never ends and the craziness that just doesn't stop. I know. There are jury issues, juror issues. There are Reddit issues. There are jury questions. Oh, I know, and we are going to talk about all that and more tonight. My plan was to just have a nice chill night. I've popped a Waterloo here. This is not sponsored by Waterloo. To hang out. And yes, Mo, it's the trial that keeps on giving. I'm on my own with shaky Wi-Fi here at my house. It went down last night, which is why I was at the office. We'll see how it goes. My plan was to just watch the rebuttal. And little did I know it was only 3 minutes. Could have been a real quick in and out type of video. But instead now we are going to talk. We're going to watch that rebuttal together. It's only 3 minutes. We are going to talk about the Reddit post, and we're going to talk about the jury questions and the jury requests. We're going to talk about all that, and hopefully my dad is going to join us if he figures out how to use the link, and he's going to give us a little bit of his experience as a former assistant United States attorney and former ASA dealing with sovereign citizens of all kinds and in federal court with very different judges. And I will ask him how those much more strict judges who are appointed for life dealt with sovereign citizens when there were no cameras in the courtroom. So we'll talk about all that and more. If you guys haven't, I'm pretty sure all you guys are subscribed because, again, there are all these other big streams going on right now, and you could be watching it anywhere, but you're here with me. For that, I thank you. But hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, do all the things. Let's get to it. Yeah, it says it was a prank, Mo. You all probably could have guessed that's what I was going to say about that Reddit post. It's probably fake, very likely to be fake. I guess we can hit it now. So there was a Reddit post that basically said, I think it's pretty obvious that it is Darrell Brooks. The judge is clearly biased against Mr. Brooks. When the jury was, or when we were in the room, and he said that we didn't know about stuff, it kind of made us think. He was not given the chance to plead his case. I have significant doubts about subject matter jurisdiction. That's how I knew it was not a real juror. Just FYI. Yeah, I want to be on a nice, calm stream. Thank you, Jade. That's me. That's me tonight. Where this is going to be a calm stream. Okay, this is going to be a calm stream. When this person said they had doubts about subject matter jurisdiction, I knew it was fake because there's no way. If they had doubts about different things, fine, but not subject matter jurisdiction. The subreddit has made me aware of jury nullification. I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure what I'm going to decide, but it's clear that this trial is complete kangaroo court. I don't think a juror would go on and do this. I really don't think they would, especially something to this magnitude. I really don't think they would happen. So people are asking what happened. So on Reddit, where you can just go pop off and things can't be verified, a potential juror on this case said, "Oh, I am a juror on the Darrell Brooks case, and I kind of believe Darrell Brooks. I think he's not getting a fair shot. I don't think they've proved subject matter jurisdiction. This is really unfair." And well, I don't know which way I'm going to vote, but this judge is very biased against him. Okay, that's what the supposed juror said on Reddit. So if that was true, okay, yes, everybody, I know that it's fake, but let's just say it was true. Okay, I guess it's come out that people said it's fake, and he admitted that it's fake. And they're censoring that post now. But let's say it was real. Okay, the judge found out this morning, and law enforcement has been on it. They were gonna, I don't know if they did, but they would likely question every single juror individually if that was them. And if the juror said yes, they would either have to admit that it was them or commit a crime of perjury. That no, it was not them. They would have to swear that under oath. And if they're found out later, now they could be going to jail. Do you think anybody's going to risk that for Darrell Brooks? Because I don't think that that's how it works. I really don't think that's how it works. People are saying no video or sound, that the stream is frozen. On my end, it looks like the stream is fine, so we're going to keep rolling for now. My dad just popped in, so we're gonna bring him on. We're going to watch the state's rebuttal together, and then we're going to talk to him about sovereign citizens. We're going to talk to him about working with them. We're going to talk about what he thinks about this case, what he thinks about sovereign citizens, things like that. People said the stream is fine, so we're going to keep rolling. So for those of you who are new, I'm bringing you in now, Dad. Why don't you give us the testing?
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2
That
3.
works. Hello there.
Hello.
So, this is my dad, George Tragos, also my law partner. He's been a lawyer for like 40 years. He was a former assistant state attorney, then a former assistant U.S. attorney. While he was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, he was the chief of the criminal division. So he basically ran all the criminal cases in the Middle District of Florida, which is Tampa, and handled all sorts of cases, dealt with sovereign citizens. And we're going to ask him about all of that. But first, we're going to watch the state's rebuttal together. It's very short. It's only 3.5 minutes. And she said a lot of what we wanted her to say. So, Dad, in case you didn't catch all the closing arguments, we streamed on the channel today. The state got up. It wasn't the best closing argument, but it wasn't the worst. She talked about intent, and that was the big deal, and the difficulty is proving intent in this case. Darrell Brooks' entire closing was about jury nullification. He asked the jury, told them that they had the power to nullify. He told them about his kids and how they should have sympathy and how he's never even held his baby and how basically he had admitted doing all of this, but he did not intend to hurt anybody. He did not intend to do that. He can't figure out why. That was basically his closing.
Did the judge interrupt him at all in his closing?
Yeah, I mean, they hours literally of them fighting before the closing started about whether or not he's going to be able to talk about subject matter jurisdiction or jury nullification. So, yeah, people I think are from Facebook having an issue. But okay, so the state did not talk enough about the victims. A lot of us thought while we were listening to it. We talked about how he said he felt like he was powerless. We were all saying, well, how about the victims? They're the ones that are powerless. She didn't mention Jackson, who was the 8-year-old that was killed in her first closing, but on rebuttal, which was very short, she did all that and more. So we're going to watch it here together. Like I said, it's just a few short minutes. So let's take a listen to the state's closing argument.
You have 13:28 left.
She had 13 minutes. She didn't use it.
Thank you, Judge. I don't think that'll be.
Oh, he also talked a lot about how he's a man of God. He reads his Bible. He lives by the good book. And, he's God-fearing, and he doesn't understand why this is all part of God's will, and all that stuff was also a big part of his closing as well.
Folks, let me just say this. Mr. Brooks stands here and professes to speak to you from his heart. He plays on your sympathy, talks about his children.
The state did not object to his sympathy arguments, which I thought was interesting, but instead she decides to use them against him. She also did that. We represent the people of the state of Wisconsin, which is annoying, but he was so annoying throughout the trial as the state was not a plaintiff, so that's why they went deep into that.
He talks about the hardships that he's encountered and his family's encountered. And he brushes over the loss to the community. He wants to talk about how he's never held his newborn son, never once acknowledges the Sorensen family, the Owen family, the Duran family, the Hospital family, the Kulik family, Sparks family. Never once. It's nice that Mr. Brooks can get letters from his loved ones. I don't know why he did this. I told you that. But actions define a person. It's that simple. You can stand with the Bible in your hands all day long and profess to be the finest man under God that you can be. But when you drive through a parade route and roll over children with band instruments to the extent that your vehicle heaves up and down, your intent is known, Mr. Brooks. It doesn't have to be guessed.
And that's a great thing to do in closing, especially when the defendant is the lawyer. You're going to look right at him. You can almost talk at him, point at him. Prosecutors love doing that.
It's known. don't have to stand and wonder as he claims to. For him to keep going after he drove over those children in the band and have Jackson Sparks fly off the front hood of his car, lifeless, and keep going. And have Jane Kulik fly off the hood of his car, run her over, and keep going. I'm not going to go on. You get it. You need to look in the mirror, Mr. Brooks. If you want to accuse me of practicing my closing argument, you need to look in the mirror, sir. Your actions are that of a murderer. You murdered these 6 people. You endangered the safety of 61 others. There are 68 victims in this case, folks. That's not an accident. That's not a, gee, I woke up one day and don't know how I found myself in this position. If you have some explaining to do to your children, Mr. Brooks, I recommend you do it.
That's probably improper. That ending was probably improper, looking right at him. Doug D said, did he really blame it all on God? Pretty much. Brianna CC said, should the state have objected to sympathy plea in closing? I sure think so. But there are 2 ways to handle it. You can either object to it or you can do what she did and use it against him. You disagree?
I do. When you're prosecuting a guy who's unrepresented, you've got to give him a lot of leeway. Otherwise, you start looking like a bully. And, you don't want to look like a bully. The guy is going to hang himself. He's going to look bad to the jury. Let them make their own determination, because you don't want to be the guy that says, let him get up there and say, I tried to tell you all this stuff, but you see what the state did? They stopped me every chance they got so that you wouldn't know the truth. I really think that they did the right thing. Now, her closing argument could have been a lot better, especially that rebuttal. But as far as letting him go, I think letting him go is the right way.
So, just so everybody knows in the chat, my dad did not watch most of the trial. They let him do whatever he wanted every single day. Nobody ever stopped him. He trampled all over everybody. And basically told the judge he was going to argue jury nullifications. He said, no, you're not. And the state was like, well, judge, let's just let him do the closing argument anyways, argue jury nullification, and then we'll just object to it. So they let him do everything. They didn't trample on anything. So I probably still would have objected. He did also argue these facts not in evidence, that there was some class action lawsuit, and his car had malfunctions, which never came into evidence, and all sorts of stuff like that. It went wild. Melanie Casio said, Uhtred, I think we should send the real Uhtred in and see what happens. But in all seriousness, I want to thank you for your coverage. We all love it. And although I never want to see anything like this again, I'll miss the night lives. They're a little crazy, especially tonight. But let's get into a little sovereign citizen talk now. We'll get to the jury questions, what they could want, what they mean. We'll get to that in a little bit. But so what's it like generally dealing with sovereign citizens? What do they believe? Why is it so difficult to wrangle them in and get things moving in a case like this?
Well, as you might guess, there's a lot of variations of sovereign citizens, but they have one overriding theory. The theory is the government and laws do not apply to them, that they are citizens in their own right. They are sovereign. God has given them the sovereign right to exist and rule themselves. So you pass laws by the legislature, you have a constitution, judges are appointed by the government. None of them have any authority over them. You will go by, I remember in Vermont or New Hampshire, I went by a farm. There was a big sign on the farm. Government agents are not allowed on this farm. This farm is an independent country. And that's what sovereign citizens believe. And by the way, as long as you asked about sovereign citizens, the overwhelming amount of prosecutions of sovereign citizens, this is an unusual event, are them not paying taxes, tax evasion, because they do not believe that the tax laws apply to them and they shouldn't pay money to a government that is not their government. So they're prosecuted over and over again for failing to file taxes.
Yeah, and Sarah said he's not claiming to be a sovereign in his other 4 ongoing cases. So this guy's a little bit different. So it seems he became a sovereign citizen while in prison, and then decided to represent himself. Derby Mom said, "Good evening, gentlemen. What are the chances of a successful appeal upon conviction and him being sent to a mental facility instead of prison?" So how do sovereign citizens do? What's their track record like? And when they represent themselves and do these things in court, how likely do they win or win an appeal?
Personally, I've never seen one win,
Me neither.
ever. And because their argument is, I admit I did the facts that you say I did, but you don't have authority to punish me for those facts. Therefore, I could just walk out of here whenever I wanted because the police can't stop me or arrest me. I'll just walk out of the courtroom. So I've never seen them win on this sovereign citizen situation. They also do a lot of forgeries because they also sign a lot of documents because they believe that they can, for instance, mortgage foreclosures. They believe they can overrule mortgage foreclosures and issue an order, and they'll actually go to the courthouse and file a paper overruling a mortgage foreclosure because they don't believe that the court has the right to take their property.
Jennifer asked if they trace Reddit post IP back to the jail, could DB be charged with anything? Sure sounds like his words. Yeah, it wasn't him. I would be shocked if it was actually him. CC Walters, the Bible, he says it's his, but it says WCJ, Waukesha County Jail. I guess it's a loner. I guess so.
I saw that. I saw that too. It's funny.
Yeah,
I saw that too.
Yeah. Martha said the jury is still asking questions. So we already have some jury questions, but there are even more. Jen Burns, I've heard prosecutors refer to the defendant, but never speak directly to them as she did. Does that happen often? What would you say?
Yes, it does in various ways. This was a unique way because he was representing himself. And that's what I said about her closing. It could have been much stronger because it's his words. It's not words coming from his lawyer, but it's his words. You can blame him for what he said. Many times you'll go over and you'll point to a defendant sitting at the table and say, that guy or him, or you'll do stuff like that. But in this case, you've got the opportunity to really use his words against him,
even though they're not testimony or evidence. Salina Stovall, will the jury watch everything they couldn't see after? If they want to, that's up to them. T-Bird, my son was watching with me and he said your dad looks like a boss. Well, he is. He gets Sean Connery a lot. Lisa, just joining. Big thank you to Papa Tragos for his expertise. Gary Court, your dad is a smart man, seems extremely capable. I can see that you are following in that. I love your streams and the sheer amount you get through. Thanks. You're reaching England and we like it. Interlocution? Does anyone ever explain to Sovsits about how they use government services and infrastructure every day, like roads and utilities?
True sovereign citizens really don't. They live off the grid. I mean, the real true ones, they'll live on a mountaintop. They'll use a well. They won't have electricity. They'll use candles or a fire.
Those are the ones that actually believe it.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how extreme. That's what I'm saying. There are different alliterations of sovereign citizens, and there are some that live totally off the grid, totally isolated from the whole world.
Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction of the ones that are actually real and the ones that are not. And in this case, you could point out all of their inconsistencies, but they really wouldn't care. Derby Mom, odds of him going to a mental hospital instead of jail, I think is unlikely. What do you think?
I think he'll go to jail, but let's remember, jails have mental wards within the jails, and he may end up in one of the medical facilities for criminals, but he won't be not guilty, so he won't go to a hospital where he could ever get out.
Yeah, but he hasn't had any incompetence problems. Like, yeah, it seems, not with it when we listen to him argue, but he really hasn't had that issue throughout the process. I
wonder what he's like in jail. I'm curious what inside that county jail. I wonder what kind of grief he gives the guards inside that jail.
So I will say that his personality on like TikTok video, somebody sent me one of the worst TikTok videos I've ever seen about him talking about the mother of his children, who was one of the victims in the case. But I mean, it's horrible. He's a different guy for sure. Jenny X, ever deal with religious who claim God's law is higher, just curious thinking Amish, etc.? Why don't you tell them about your Christian Science case? I think I mentioned it. They were Christian scientists, right?
Yes, the ones who
Bee
wouldn't get
sting.
any medical help for their child.
So hold on. So hold on. Before you get to it, is that also the case you waived your closing argument and won?
Yes.
So I told them about that. I told them you waived your closing argument 2 times, so the state didn't get rebuttal. One was a win, one was a loss. So before we get to whether this was the win or the loss, why
Actually,
don't
it
you?
was 3 times, 2 wins, 1 loss.
Okay.
Even that there was one other
So
one.
all right. So why don't we talk about this case? Talk about how religion played into it and what happened, as briefly as you can.
Okay, you're talking about the case I won,
The
the case
Christian
I
Science.
tried. Okay.
Well, now you gave it away. Yes, that was the win. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that was one of the wins. Okay, so the parents, their child got stung 450 times by yellow jackets. The child was acting normal and then started acting sick. They didn't know it, but your brain swells, and that's what was going on with him. Was his brain was swelling, even though he might have looked normal. And so they put him into a bath. They try to do all sorts of stuff for him, but they did not call a doctor. And the reason they didn't call a doctor is they didn't believe in doctors. However, the child eventually did pass away. But the witnesses that were in the room all testified to the same thing. He didn't look like he was that sick until it was too late to save him. And so the prosecution tried to say that he was obviously in distress. They should have done something. It's because of their beliefs. However, the reason I waived closing is the reason I waived my closing was, if you remember what this prosecutor did, I didn't see the beginning, but I saw her last closing. Her last closing is when she really brought up the families and started naming the families and did more of an emotional closing at the end. By me not giving that closing, it didn't give the prosecutor the opportunity to come in and talk about how sad it was that this little boy died and to show pictures. He showed no pictures in the first part of his opening. So he couldn't show any pictures in the second part of his opening because I waived my closing. Second part of his closing because I waived my closing. So because of that, I totally emasculated the emotional argument they were going to give. That's why I think in this case, she could have done a better job. I would have had pictures all over the place in that closing.
All right. April Michelle, why isn't the jury handed all of the evidence? Why only one piece at a time? That depends on the case. Sometimes they are handed all the evidence is put back in the jury room. It depends on how voluminous it is. But a lot of the jury questions have had to do with evidence, and we will get to that. That'll be the next part of the video. MVD, could the judge have said, you aren't permitted to bring up subject matter jurisdiction again to speed this up based on what your father just said? Can living off the grid be criteria? Based on what your father just said, can living off the grid be criteria to indulge? I don't know what you mean criteria to indulge. And yes, she did tell him he couldn't bring up subject matter jurisdiction many times. Suzanne Davila, he claims sovereign, but leans a lot on the Constitution. If he isn't a part of our government, then it shouldn't apply to him. He basically said that he's a sovereign citizen of the United States of America. He said he's a sovereign citizen of the United States of America, so I don't know if that's different than some sovereign citizens you've dealt with.
Well, no, they could still be citizens of the country, but they don't believe that the government has any rights over them because they are sovereign, independently sovereign.
Dave Mid, after this trial ends, will we ever see him rep himself in court again, like a repeal? I think he would represent himself in the other cases probably after this. Who knows?
He enjoyed it.
Law Francisco, PT Express, how would you or your dad handle a client like DB? Well, I don't think he'd be our client long because we would not argue subject matter jurisdiction. We would not argue any sovereign citizen garbage that he would want to argue. Like we said all along, we would argue against intent, I think, is the best argument that they have. He's going to get sunk for most of the charges just based off the pictures in the video. So there was probably a plea deal where he could have accepted responsibility, apologized to the family, said not guilty by reason of insanity, potentially, if he had a temporary insanity, a mental break. But that's really the only argument you had in this case. There's no I didn't do it argument. As you even heard him, he didn't argue that himself. Anything you want to add?
No, I think you're right. He would have fired us. Yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah.
because we wouldn't have done what he wanted. And if clients don't follow our advice, we're adios.
Lisa Boris, did Papa Tragos waive closing argument on the fly as it was happening? What about that in that other case? Did you?
And what I always do is I ask the judge for a few minutes. I talk to the clients. I tell them, look, I'm taking a risk here. I want you to understand it, that I think it's the best way to go. I mean, it's right then. It happens. It doesn't happen until after the first half of the prosecution's argument. And I say, look, this is the way I think we should go. And in every case, my clients went with my recommendation, but I discussed it with the clients.
I remember in the case that one of the closings, one of the ones that you lost, I was actually working at the state attorney's office, and I was sitting on the state attorney's side while I was there, and my dad was trying the case. It was a high-profile case, and the supervising state attorney that was trying the case drank a 5-hour energy as my dad was supposed to start his closing, and then he waived it. And I remember up in the office, he was so mad talking about that case. It was actually kind of funny. Mr. Tragos, what prison do you think he will go to? I have no idea. Do you know?
No idea, because I'm not really familiar with the state prisons up there. I'm sure he will go to the one that is the most severe, with the most controlled movement, but I don't know which one it is.
John O'Rourke, I love Papa Tragos. His opinion makes it easier to understand. What makes Peter's chat great is the facts. Peter's dad, we didn't see pics from your old case, dude. Friendly posts. Southern Girl 416, you think they'll make this into a movie? I hope not.
I don't think so.
Melinda Arroyo, can what he brought up about his car put doubt? Potentially, but the jury, I mean, they objected to facts, not in evidence. So, I mean, I guess it could. It could theoretically bring up doubt, and we're never going to know what the doubt is if the jury comes back with a not guilty verdict or a hung jury. All right, let's get into a few of the. So they ended the day today. So the jury is gone. They did not come to a verdict today. I think we're going to have a verdict tomorrow because they had deliberated for 3 hours tonight. I think we're going to have a verdict tomorrow. What do you think?
I think so. How many charges are there?
76.
See, that's the delay.
I know. That's what I said too.
Each individual charge, they have to make a decision one by one. By the time you vote on 76 individual charges,
I agree.
That takes a long time.
I agree. Absolutely. And that's what I said. That's why I said by Friday for sure, because they're sequestered. But now that they've gone 3 hours tonight and they've already asked to review certain exhibits, I kind of think it could happen tomorrow. Okay. So the jury requested 3 exhibits, a map of where all the victims were, a picture of Erica Patterson's black eye, which was his ex, a photo of the SUV on Main Street by the steaming cup. So if you remember, you kind of see that is the map that they asked for. And then they asked for a video of the dancing grannies at reduced speed. Exhibit number 55 was played twice, and now the jurors wanted at a reduced speed. That was the dancing grannies. It shows the red SUV headlights on, barreling through the middle of the dancing grannies. One granny is on top of the hood for several yards, and they wanted it at 40% speed. Testimony in the state's case showed Brooks zigzagging through the grannies in her closing. Opper stressed that proves intent. So to me, what this indicates is the jury is trying to figure out intent. He's going to be guilty on most of the charges, but intentional homicide. And to me, they're looking for and asking for the exact exhibits that DA Opper told them to ask for and look at in her closing, which I think means guilty verdicts are coming across the board, including intent. Do you think there are any issues with intent in this case? The jury is coming in now? Somebody just said? I don't know what the heck's going on here. I have the stream up. I'll put it over here. I don't really want to live stream anymore, if I'm being honest. But they're back in, so we'll see what happens there. But so with these jury questions and with intent, do you think there's an issue with intent here because there's no motive? They don't have to prove motive, but if you have no idea why, it's hard to prove intent. He also kind of could argue he was fleeing a situation with a knife. But do you think that just the fact that he kept driving, knowing these people were going to die, is enough to prove intent? Most of the people in the chat feel like it is. I felt like maybe, and then you can be swayed by the evidence that I think it still does prove intent based on what he did. But that was the only hang up for me, was could they prove intent?
I have a lot of faith in juries, and they have narrowed it down to one issue. I believe it's intent. So they've narrowed it down. So they're only looking at that information. And intent, again, I don't know how the prosecutor explained it, but intent can be a split second where you intended it like that. And the fact that he didn't stop the car, the fact that he kept going, that 40%, maybe they want to see that poor granny on top of that hood, or they may, I don't know if these show any of the bounce of the car going over a body, but that's all showing he could have stopped. He could have prevented it. After the first person, he could have stopped, and he kept going. So if he says, look, I didn't have the intent when I hit the first person, fine. But how do you explain that all the way down the road?
No, I agree. And I think that's the point, is like when he hit the first person and continued running over bodies, and a lot of people said maybe not intent for the first person, but all the other ones. I get it. But it is hard to think, that this could have been an accident, but he didn't take the stand and he didn't explain what that accident could have been.
He didn't have
the
to.
Judge, right. The judge said
that
he
was there the whole time. He was testifying the whole time.
The judge said that they'll be back at 8:30 in the morning tomorrow. Thanks for the insight, Papa Tragos. P-Hop said, eyes go. What's the difference between Amish and sovereign citizen? Actually, they're not citizens literally. Sounds anarchic. What if people got united one day and say we're all sovereign? What then? Well, as long as we have law enforcement, it doesn't really matter if people say they're sovereign if they live here. Amish people would never be disrespectful like this in court, number one. Number two, they do not break the laws of the land. They kind of are like, leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. They don't try to be combative.
Oh, sure. When you see them, and I've been up to the Amish areas in my life, they do their buggies, but they do them on the correct side of the road along, they obey all the traffic laws. They stop at lights. I mean, they don't do it. They're not sovereign citizens. They believe they are citizens. They just have their own way of living a lifestyle, but it's not to violate the law.
John O'Rourke says 2 times bonus. We get both Tragos. Peter, your pops may got ya. Wink. Natalie Walker, Boscobel is our maximum facility prison. So there's a ton of people that are actually from Wisconsin in the area that this happened. And a lot of people have been in the chat talking about the case, talking about what it's done to the community when it's been like to the community. So I assume Natalie is from the area when she says our maximum facility prison. Heather Forder, Brooks looks legit shocked about the Reddit post. Yeah, I watched some of that earlier and he was like, what is this? What is this? And they explained that it's a Reddit post. And then he was like, well, Judge, it is stuff that, came out in court. The judge is like, it's being live streamed all over the country. So it wouldn't be that unusual if somebody, saw what was happening in court and made a Reddit stream. Somebody already did post on Reddit and saying that it was fake. Lisa, you two remind me of an ESPN show my boys watch, Highly Questionable. It was fun. Also, lots of Amish in Illinois. No problems with them. I think that was with, what's his name? Was that with Levitard, where his dad would come on the show? It was pretty funny. I think that's the one she's referencing, but I can't really remember. So yeah, this case, when somebody represents themselves and can just argue, how hard is it to deal with as a prosecutor? And it's the actual district attorney. What is the most difficult part of dealing with a sovereign citizen in a case like this? Or I actually tried a case against a pro se defendant that was a sovereign citizen. Did you ever actually go to trial on one? And what do you think?
Like I said, tax cases. It happened all the time with tax cases.
Ours accused law enforcement officers of filing a false police report against him. That was what ours was. But go ahead. What is it? What was the most difficult part in your opinion?
The most difficult part was controlling myself in realizing he's not a lawyer and that I don't want to look like a bully.
You don't want to steamroll him.
Well, my problem is I have an aggressive style. When I try a case, I'm really aggressive. I'm in your face. I'm objecting all the time. I'm doing all sorts of stuff. But when I had to tone that down because I didn't want the jury to be sympathetic toward this guy that I was bullying, so I would tone it down. Now, it is the judge's responsibility to control the courtroom. And so You have to depend on that judge who is hypothetically a neutral, so the jury wouldn't take a position based on what the judge was doing. The judge could try to be neutral about this, but it's the judge's job to control that courtroom and to control the situation and to control that sovereign citizen.
Yeah, I do think that's the difficult part in this case. The judge did a really good job protecting this all for appeal, but I do think she let it go a little too far a few times, but probably better to err on that side so that we don't have to do this all over again and try this case all over again.
Well, it used to be. Now we have
Thank you, Beverly.
The media, things like that, it used to be, and it happened. One of the famous trials was the Chicago 7 trial, where Judge Hoffman actually bound and gagged one of the defendants, put tape over his mouth, and tied him to a chair because he wouldn't obey, wouldn't behave. But now, when this trial exhibited, you can put him with all the media in a separate courtroom. He can have all the access that way, and he can be controlled that way. And that certainly has better optics than a bound and gagged defendant sitting in the room.
Do you think there are any constitutional issues with that, with putting him in the other courtroom?
No,
any constitutional issues muting him?
I do not think there is a constitutional issue muting him. I do think there probably have to be a court reporter in the other room, so whatever he says is taken down as part of the record. But no, I don't think so, because judges tell lawyers all the time, keep your mouth shut and sit down. And we do.
Yeah, exactly. We actually do. That's the difference. People asked if there was a court reporter in the other room, and I thought it'd be interesting because they'd have two transcripts going at once. So I didn't know if that was possible, but you say that is probably how it was. And that's what people said, that they think there was a court reporter in there, which is really interesting. There was something else I was just going to say. Oh, confrontation clause issues. Now, most of the state's case in chief, he was actually in the courtroom. But parts of his case in chief and the jury instructions and argument and things like that, he was in the other courtroom. Do you think there's a confrontation clause issue if he would have been in the other courtroom, if he couldn't see the jury fully or see the witnesses fully or things like that?
There's case law on that, where they have allowed that to happen. They do it a lot in juvenile cases, where they put the child in a different courtroom so the child doesn't actually face his abuser. And the child doesn't have to come into a courtroom and face, all these people and all these jurors. And the courts have allowed that as long as the defendant has full access to cross-examine and full access to see and hear everything that's going on. They have ruled that satisfies the confrontation clause.
Yeah, and I think it did, and I think they did everything to do that in this case. I did think it was interesting that that most of the case in chief, where he was confronting the witnesses against him and the evidence against him, he was actually in the courtroom, which I think is always interesting.
And the confrontation clause does not apply to his
witnesses. Right, to his witnesses, right. Which they didn't seem like they were his witnesses, but he still called them. What do you think his potential best appellate issues would be in a case like this?
Well, there are appeals about a circus atmosphere in a courtroom, and whether or not that deprived him of a fair trial. That's
even if he causes the circus?
Issue. Even if he causes it. That's going to be a big issue. Whether the judge, and in this case, again, you're right, she went out of her way to protect her record. Whether the judge, abridged or somehow stopped him from presenting his arguments or his constitutional arguments. I don't know. Again, because he caused it, and you raised that, a lot of those issues the appellate courts aren't going to be real sympathetic to. So I don't know what his best appellate issue is going to be.
Yeah, I don't either. He didn't really waive his right to testify, but he constructively waived it by not obeying the judge's instructions and not doing what she said. But that was interesting. So what about a mistrial based on him talking about jury nullification? Explain how that works, how you can't create your own mistrial, and what you can kind of do when you can get a mistrial, how you make that decision as to whether or not you want to actually object and ask for it.
Well, if it's a mistrial he creates, obviously it's not an appellate issue. You can't get a reversal. However, if he creates a mistrial and the court grants it by saying that this is so unfair, I'm going to grant the mistrial, because he created it, double jeopardy doesn't apply, so they'll be able to retry him. if the state caused the mistrial, if they did something deliberately to cause that mistrial, then double jeopardy does apply and he cannot be retried. So his actions causing the mistrial, he would get retried anyway. Just like if his actions caused the reversal on appeal, they'd still retry him, even if it was his fault that it got reversed.
Okay, cool. Okay, hold on one second. All right, so let's get to a couple more questions. I just got a DM from Emily D. Baker. I'm going to try to pop on to her stream in a few minutes once we finish here. But we have about 5 more minutes over here that I want to get through a few of these questions and have Dad answer a few more things. Rob M., when I'm vacationing in Florida, if I ever get in trouble, I'm hoping that won't happen. I'm hiring Tragos Law. Yeah. Injured or arrested, you can call us. A nice plug for our actual firm, which is our day job, tragoslaw.com, if you want to check out our actual law firm, since we do practice law, in fact. Steph Morris, could DB be found guilty on some charges and not guilty on the others? Thank you for covering the coverage of this case. Nice to see Papa Tragos. So yes, he could be guilty on some and not others based on intent, based on whether they think he did endanger certain victims and not others. I think it would be unlikely, but it is possible. MVD, thank you for this introspective, Peter, because these are virtually all of the questions I have. Good. Audra. Dad, you remember Audra? You met her at FACDL.
Yes,
I believe.
I do.
Yes,
Hi,
I believe
Audra.
that's Audra. I'm pretty sure that's Audra. I think these appellate courts now can watch the video and they will see all. Don't you think that's coming now in appeals courts with the live streams? What do you think? You think appellate courts are actually going to watch the video, or are they going to stick to the paper?
They're going to stick to the paper.
I think so
because the video takes way too long. It's a lot quicker to read a transcript than it is to sit there and watch how many days worth of trial was this.
Maybe they can do my speed, 2x speed, which is how I watch all this stuff on.
Yeah, but I think reading for sure. Also, citations would be tougher in video than they would be in the paper when you try to cite a page and line number. Yeah.
Yeah. Joy Smith, I will be over there very soon. CC Walters. Brooks never even asked for a dismissal after the state rested their case. Not that it would have been granted, but you never know. Yeah, he did waive a lot of issues for appeal. He didn't ask for a JOA or anything like that in the middle of trial.
In a lot of states, you do not have to ask for that dismissal to preserve your appellate rights.
And so Natalie did say, I am from Waukesha. I had friends and family at the parade. Thankfully, none of them were physically harmed. And thank you for being here, Natalie, and everybody that did come from that area. And, you know, it's been really interesting to cover this case. It's been a wild one. We will still cover it until the verdict and probably after. CMC, yes, thanks, Dad, for joining us. We're going to hit one more question on our way out here from Paula. Could you explain why a hung jury leads to a mistrial instead of a not guilty verdict? Thanks.
Because you have to have a unanimous verdict either way. Everybody guilty, everybody not guilty. Otherwise, it gets tried again. That's that's the way the Constitution is written.
Yeah, and I mean, and then you can retry that. Double jeopardy doesn't attach on that kind of mistrial. Right. So, you know, that would be a situation where we could potentially have another trial. But that's all we got tonight. Maybe I'll bring my dad back when we get the verdict on. Dad, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Thank you to everybody in the chat for coming in, bringing your questions. If you want to pop over to Emily D. Baker, let her know you came from here. I'm going to go wrap up with her, I guess. I don't know what we're going to talk, but it'll be fun. All right. I'll see you tomorrow, Dad. Love you.
See ya. Love you.